What if I told you the United States once had a real top-secret military-backed plan to detonate a nuclear bomb on the moon? Yes, seriously, this isn't a conspiracy theory. It wasn't a sci-fi villain's idea. It was an actual proposal backed by military officials, nuclear physicists, and even some of the greatest minds in space science. This was the Cold War, a time when the US and the Soviet Union were willing to do almost anything to assert their dominance. And in their race to control space, some ideas were, well, out of this world. One of those ideas was Project A119, a mission designed to send a nuclear missile to the moon and create an explosion so massive, so bright, that it could be seen from Earth. The goal? A show of force that would terrify the Soviets and reassure the American public. But why would the US even consider doing something so extreme? How close did we actually come to seeing a mushroom cloud rising over the moon's surface? And what stopped it? Strap in, because this is the real story of the time the US almost nuked the moon. To understand why the US even considered nuking the moon, we have to go back to the 1950s, when the world was on edge. The Cold War had created two massive superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union, locked in a high-stakes battle for military, technological, and ideological superiority. This was a time of paranoia and tension. Both nations were rapidly developing nuclear weapons, and each one feared the other might strike first. The arms race was already in full swing, but in 1957, the Soviets did something that changed the game entirely. They launched Sputnik 1, the first artificial satellite to orbit the Earth. This tiny metal sphere, just 23 inches wide, sent shockwaves through the United States. It wasn't just about science, it was about power. If the Soviets could send a satellite into space, what was stopping them from launching a nuclear missile from space? Overnight, the space race had begun, and the United States needed a comeback, something dramatic, something undeniable. And so, deep in the halls of the Pentagon, military officials and scientists came up with an idea that would grab the world's attention in the most explosive way possible. They would nuke the moon. In 1958, the US Air Force commissioned a top-secret project called Project A119. Its goal? To launch a nuclear missile at the moon and detonate it on impact. The logic behind this plan was almost straightforward. If the US could create a massive nuclear explosion on the lunar surface, visible from Earth, it would be the ultimate display of American firepower. It wouldn't just be a symbolic gesture, though. The US military also saw it as an opportunity to study nuclear explosions in space. Scientists hoped to analyze how the blast would interact with the moon's surface, how lunar dust and debris would behave, and what impact it might have on space radiation. But at its core, this was a psychological weapon. The explosion wouldn't have destroyed the moon or caused any catastrophic effects, but it would have been big enough to be seen by people on Earth. And that was the whole point. To the American public, it would send a clear message. We are in control of space. To the Soviet Union, it would be an unmistakable warning. If we can do this to the moon, imagine what we can do to you. But how exactly would they pull this off? Project A119 wasn't just some wild military fantasy, it was carefully planned. The team behind it included top physicists, engineers, and strategists. One of the most surprising figures involved was a young Carl Sagan, the same Carl Sagan who would later become famous for promoting peaceful space exploration. At the time, Sagan was a graduate student, and he worked on modeling the effects of the nuclear explosion, particularly how the debris and gas would spread across the moon's surface. The plan involved using an intercontinental ballistic missile ICBM to deliver a small but powerful nuclear warhead to the moon. The preferred choice was a modified W-25 warhead, which had an explosive yield of about 1.7 kilotons, far smaller than the bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, but still powerful enough to make a massive impact on the moon. Scientists even considered where on the moon the bomb should be detonated. Originally, they thought about hitting the far side of the moon, but that would have defeated the purpose, since no one on Earth would see the explosion. Eventually, they settled on the moon's terminator, the line between the moon's light and dark sides. so that the blast would be visible against the contrast of space. Despite all the planning, Project A119 never happened. By 1959, the US government had quietly scrapped the idea, and for good reason. First, there were serious scientific risks. No one knew exactly how the explosion would behave in the moon's low-gravity environment. If the bomb failed to produce the desired effect, it could have made the US look weak rather than strong. Then there was the potential fallout, literally and figuratively. Even though the moon has no atmosphere, some scientists worried that nuclear debris could contaminate future lunar missions. There was also the ethical and public relations disaster that would come if the project were ever leaked. And, perhaps most importantly, the United States soon realized there was a better way to win the space race. Instead of blowing up the moon, they could do something even more ambitious: land on it. In 1961, President John F. Kennedy made his famous announcement that the US would send astronauts to the moon and return them safely to Earth. That mission became Apollo 11. And in 1969, instead of seeing a nuclear explosion, the world saw Neil Armstrong take his first steps on the lunar surface. After Apollo 11's historic moon landing in 1969, NASA didn't stop there. Several more missions followed, each one pushing the boundaries of exploration. These weren't just space flights, they were powerful symbols of American innovation. The Apollo missions gave scientists an incredible opportunity to study lunar geology, solar wind, and even Earth's early history, thanks to the moon rocks brought back. But science wasn't the only goal. Each mission also sent a loud, clear message during the Cold War. The United States had the technology, the precision, and the ambition to lead in space. Without firing a single shot, America won a psychological and strategic victory. For decades, Project A119 remained classified. It wasn't until the 1990s that physicist Leonard Reifel, who led the project, finally revealed its existence to the public. The documents were declassified, and the world finally learned that we had once seriously considered nuking our closest celestial neighbor. Today, the idea seems ridiculous. But it's a reminder of just how extreme the Cold War really was. A time when nations were willing to risk almost anything for an edge. Imagine a world where the first human mark on the moon wasn't a footprint, but a radioactive crater. Thankfully, history chose a different path. Instead of destruction, we chose exploration. Instead of a nuclear flash, we sent astronauts to walk among the stars. But still, the fact that this was even considered? Absolutely mind-blowing. If you found this story fascinating, hit that like button and subscribe for more mind-blowing moments in history. And tell us in the comments, was canceling the right decision? Or would a nuclear explosion on the moon have been the ultimate Cold War flex? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more deep dives into America's biggest questions. See you next time.